36. I wanted to take a moment this morning, and if you would all just bear with me for 5 minutes. There's a few things that I'd like to cover, and I think there's things that need to be said, and then we will turn the floor over to both our county administrator and our county attorney to talk a little bit about the process with the RFP. But I want to revisit the mission statement that we have for this group. So we came together back in November and formed our airport advisory group, very different than the marketing group that was formed previously, with a different mission. Our mission statement, as a reminder, is to identify and investigate options for the continued operation and improvement of the Warren County Airport, to transmit varied options with identified benefits and drawbacks for each option to the Facilities Committee of the Board of Supervisors, to assist in the decision-making bodies, discuss and respond to any questions from the committee regarding operation or improvement possibilities at the airport. That mission statement was adopted by this group, conveyed to the Board of Supervisors, and we became a subsection of the Facilities Committee. That being said, we were created by the Facilities Committee with the idea that we would give this 6 months to a year. We did scheduling out to a year to see the type of effectiveness this group would have. As we can tell from our mission statement, one of our sole goals was to look at the improvement, at the operation and improvement of the airport. One of those items in front of us is the RFP that we have been discussing since day one. It was one of the goals of why we convened as a group, and what we were tasked to form together a group that would have expert opinions and be able to offer back a knowledgeable, informed, and hopefully meaningful recommendation to the Board of Supervisors as they start looking at different proposals. One of those being a proposal that we had from Rich Air regarding cutting of our expenses, and we spent a lot of time talking about that proposal, which is still pending, and preparing for this RFP. So this morning I really want to be able to stay on task. I want to be able to talk specifically about the RFP. That is the only item on our agenda this morning. We spoke last meeting in a very quick 1-hour meeting. We changed our meeting times and our meeting dates to allow more time, so we were not limited by our personnel and finance meetings. We hope that that would be a benefit to be able to have some of these discussions. So right up front, I think we need to start to figure out our status on the RFP and what the next steps are. I know I've heard from many of you with concerns about what direction this committee is going in and what valuable feedback, if any, we will be able to provide to the Facilities Committee. I understand that there's frustration. I too am frustrated. But it's just one more reason that this morning we need to stay focused. So in a few moments, I will ask Brian Reichenbach to talk to you about the process of which is happening with the RFP. And any comments or questions, if you could just hold them until he is done. I know he is very willing to take all of your questions today, and if he doesn't have an answer, be able to report back to us with those answers in the future. So back in 2013, as a reminder, we had an opportunity to look at our contract with Rich Air. Unfortunately, it crept up on us very quickly. I was not on the board at the time, but in reviewing those minutes and talking to those of us that were, we didn't have an opportunity to have a group like this weigh in, provide expert advice, and be able to give a recommendation to the Facilities Committee. That's different this time. We have formed this group, and all of you, for the most part, are volunteers. You've come to this with a passion for the airport and wanting to see our tax dollars spent in the most responsible way possible. Back then we had a 6-month clause where we had to say whether or not we were going to renew the RFP. I've talked to many people here in our administration, and what I've been told is we have until December of 2018. That's not correct, and I think we all know that's not correct. His contract runs out at the end of 2018, but that doesn't mean we wait until December 1st to make that decision. Jeff and Ross and I sat down back in October, and we did a timeline on what this group should look like as we're looking at the RFP, and I'm sure, Ross, you remember when we start looking at that, by this time we should have had a draft. We understand that this is a process, and we know that Brian and a team that's been assembled to work with our county administrator, county attorney, and county chair have been working, but I'm not so sure I even know who's on that group. So I know today that I've asked Brian to identify who's working on that group, what steps have been done, what the timeline looks like going forward, and what input they'll be looking for our group to provide to them. So again, we want to make sure that we aren't at the very last minute making those decisions again. In terms of timing, I sense from all of you and those that have reached out to me that there is a sense of urgency. And I would agree with you. I don't think this is something that's not being worked on. I think people are working on this behind the scenes. The problem becomes we want this group to have an active role in that. We were told that this group would have an active role in that. So what I'd like to be able to do is recognize that I understand this is a balancing act. I don't want to be in a situation where we have proposals in front of us that are withdrawn. I don't want to be in a situation where we aren't fair to all members of the public to be able to have an opportunity to bid on this. But I do recognize that this group has that expertise to be able to provide that insight. So today, what I'd like to do is stay focused on this process. At the end, after we have all our questions answered and discussion regarding the RFP, we can bring up any other pending items that you may have. I have not received any pending items from any members. But what I do want to make you aware of is that we are now a standing report on the Facilities Committee meeting. Previously, the Airport Advisory Group did not have a standing opportunity to talk about our progress, to receive referrals from that group, and for us to give referrals to that group. We pushed that through, but it wasn't a formal process. So as of last month, we did make sure that our report would be a pending item every month on the Facilities Committee. We're going to hear from Brian again where the RFP stands, about the internal committee that is drafting it. I don't know specifics, but as I said, I know that they are making progress, and hopefully we'll be able to have a meaningful discussion. I know that we need to let them do their job, but at the same point in time, we want this committee to do your job, our job. And I think we're in a good position to be able to have a positive working relationship and a two-way conversation about it. So at this point, I'm hoping I can turn it over to Brian and hear a little bit more about this process. I'd ask you to keep an open mind and listen to his updates, and then we'll be able to ask him questions as well.
Thank you. At this point, we've had several meetings. The chairman has been very heavily involved. Wayne Lamoth from the Planning Department has been involved. Ross, Jeff, myself. Ed Bartholomew was at one of the meetings, had some input, and Chairman Gerard from the Facilities Committee has been involved in some of the meetings. At this point, what we're trying to do is to conceptualize how the RFP is going to look structurally, and by that I mean we are trying to arrive at a product that will allow as many people as possible who have an interest in providing one service or another or all the services at the airport without having to provide the entire banquet. If somebody wants to come and provide the soup but doesn't want to do the dessert, we want to give them an opportunity to bid on that. So what we're trying to do at this point is to figure out two kinds of things. Those things that the county just can't let someone else do, and those kinds of things that can be privatized that someone else could do. Then when we get that breakdown, which I think we have close to at this point, then we're trying to decide of those other functions that can be privatized, what ones are separate. For example, do certain elements, certain functions out there, certain services also come with other services that should be tied together, that should be a package deal. That's what we're trying to do right now, is to come up with those insular areas so that as many people as possible can bid on one particular item or more than that. There's no limit. You can bid on one, you can bid on two, you can bid on everything if you want. That's what we want to do, is structure it in a way to get the most responses and the most competitive responses possible. The goal for the process is at this point to have a draft RFP to present to this group, that this group can then make suggestions, have input, and offer ideas on. It's a balancing act, as you said, Chairman, because we need to allow the public to have input on the process. However, we've got a bidder here, a prospective bidder here in the room, and we don't want to do anything that's an unfair advantage to him or an unfair disadvantage to him. So our vision is to allow the public at large, through this group, to comment on the RFP. We take those comments with the internal group that's working on it, then turn out, based with those comments, some being included, some not being included probably, and then use that to arrive at the final RFP that's then issued to the public for proposals, and no one has then had a leg up because everyone could have made comments on the draft. That's kind of an overview of the process that we're undertaking. One of the questions at this point is whether we want to have an outside consultant involved, a airport management consultant involved, to help us do that initial breakout of what could be private and what should not be private. We've had discussions with one. We don't know if we're going to enter into a contract with that individual or not, but that's not holding up the process. We're continuing to work without that individual's input at this point.
Thank you. At this point, what I want to do is open it up to questions. This is your committee, and I want to make sure that you all feel comfortable in the process, but have an opportunity to ask any questions that you might have. Travis?
I would just say, that all sounds good, but, and I like the idea of the a la carte, but I don't really know what happens if someone chooses to bid on one and other person's on number 5 item and number 7, and you have nobody really doing 2, 3, and 6. In the end, you don't have a workable plan. So I don't know if you really want to, I don't know if you really can break this up. It's more, you can look at it as a la carte, and I like that idea, but you could also look at it as cherry picking, and I'm not so sure that, you're just not going to get people out there to cherry pick these things and then leave the nasty stuff on the table for what?
Right.
You need to take the good with the bad, I think.
And Brian, I think you're the only representative other than Ross in the room that's on that RFP group. Do you want to speak to Travis's concerns?
Sure, absolutely. That is one of our concerns, so that's one of the reasons, that's one of the considerations we're using in trying to determine which things have to be tied together. If there's a particular function that's the messy part of the job and it can be tied logically to the gravy part of the job, that's one of the things we're looking at. So I appreciate that thought, that consideration.
Supervisor Montesi?
If you go by that cherry picking, for instance, fuel sales, somebody's going to look at that and say, that's a pretty good deal. The county's only getting 7.5, we'll give it 10. So, I'm not sure that this a la carte is really workable. I mean, I from a management point of view, if I had 5 different guys who's doing snow plowing, who's doing fuel sales, it could get pretty cumbersome in terms of managing that as a business. I think you've got to give some serious consideration. I think the only breakdown that I saw that made sense was what can we privatize and what the feds say we can't. And I don't know, I don't like the a la carte because I just see it as a difficult management position for the county. Somebody's going to have to oversee these guys or gals.
Thank you, Ron, and I tend to agree with you on that. I think that there's a lot of concern about that a la carte piece of it. Have you been able to identify what specifically the county is federally required to do versus what we can go out for?
I have some idea of it, but I'm going to, sandbag Ross here because that's really his bailiwick.
What we really need to focus on is what are our grant assurances, what are we federally obligated to do through our grant assurances. So that's really where the focus needs to be in determining, what we shouldn't privatize is what we've obligated to the federal government. And that really pertains to the airfield safety, the obstructions, the runway safeties and taxiway safety areas, the things that are regulatory in nature.
Is there any other questions or comments or concerns for Mr. Westcott?
Public allowed to speak?
Yes, of course. This is a public group.
Sure. Mark Westcott from Queensbury. I'm very concerned about the a la carte option. In my time on this board and afterwards, I've been one operator out at the airport, Rich Air, and I've heard time and time again concerns about anybody else coming to the table to bid on an RFP. And the current operator has a proposal on the table, and I'm afraid if you take away certain elements of that proposal, he's going to withdraw the whole thing. Supervisor Montesi had a great point. What if somebody undermines them on the fuel sales? Well, the fuel sales are what are going to go to fund the other elements of his plan that are going to get the cost down. So now you're asking him to basically take his proposal and break it out into different chunks, take the lawn mowing. Now he's got to competitively bid against the local nursery or something. I think if I read that proposal correctly, and there's a gentleman from Rich Air here that can correct me if I'm wrong, that it all works together. The fuel sales become the revenue stream in order to fund the other elements of the plan that are going to get this thing down in cost by what they project is $500,000. And so I would caution you to not cut off your nose to spite your face with this a la carte option. I think it sounds great at face value, but I think when you get into it, you're potentially leading down a path you don't want to go down. That's what I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Wild?
Thanks, Madam Chairman. Mike Wild from Queensbury. I just want to add what Mr. Westcott had to say. Consider how they'll put together the proposal. What you may end up having is if you choose a la carte, you get those individual pieces that are much more expensive than the combined total. And I just think about responding to an RFP. I've done it many different times before. When there's a la carte, you price everything to get a profit on every single piece. So if there's a major part of the operation that not too many people are going to want to bid on, it's going to end up costing you more for that individual piece. So the suggestion might be is have it a la carte, but also do some kind of weighting system for people that are adding more pieces to the puzzle. Right? And I'm not sure how you do that, but it's a suggestion, because I know if I was responding to the RFP, each one's going to drive me a profit. I just think it makes it more difficult for you to realize the savings, just because of the way that those pieces are going to be combined. Hope that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Montesi?
Mr. Chairman, one of the questions that I have is, and I guess it would go to Ross, the fire department, the fire truck.
Yep.
That was a federally funded project, and I guess the building too.
Right.
Is that something that we would allocate to the person running the airport, or is that something we need to retain? Because we have, right now, we have county employees that are trained in the use of that foam truck, right?
Yeah, that is correct, yeah. Currently, it's county employees that are trained to operate the aircraft rescue firefighting equipment. There is no reason why that couldn't be contracted out.
Okay,
Yep.
that was my answer. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just think, you need to split it out on what's operation and maintenance and what is sales, and I think you need to detail a little bit differently than do every individual thing. I understand what you're trying for, but there's operation and maintenance of the airport, and then there's the revenues derived from the airport, and I think the two of them tie in very, very closely. So I would be very careful about breaking up every little aspect of that airport without trying to mold some of it together, or you may not get what you think you're going to get. You may get 50 cents more here, but you're going to lose it on the long end of it. And yet, I think everybody needs to be aware, the buildings, some of those buildings out there still belong to the county, irregardless of who takes over some of the operation. So you're not going to get to a zero budget. You're never going to get to a zero budget. There are maintenance items that the county is always going to be responsible for with some of those buildings. So, but I would just be very, very careful of taking 15 items and breaking down 15 items. I think you need to split operation and maintenance versus revenue. And I have a hard time thinking that will work if you do it a la carte totally.
I think the Supervisor Garrity brings up some very good points. I'm also going to ask that the minutes of this meeting, along with the YouTube link, get sent to all of the individuals on your RFP group. We certainly appreciate you being here, Brian. I extended that invitation to the other members to be able to report back to the committee. But our hope is that they take seriously the comments that are made by this group who really know what they're talking about and be able to provide that insight. Kevin?
Well, the other thing is, I think the advisory group could chime in on how they would like to see the operation continue. I mean, there's the general aviation aspect, and then there's the jet aspects of the airport. Even though we try to work them together, they are different. So I think that would be important if we could get some input from the advisory group on how those things meld into this RFP.
Okay. Mark?
I have another comment I wanted to make. I met with the county treasurer yesterday. Wanted to get an update on numbers. The county has $26 million fund balance. You're to be commended for that. $9 million of it is tied to specific allocations. That takes it down to $17 million. And he needs $10 million for rainy day money. So that leaves $7 million to play with. He had just secured the bonds for both the second payment of the courthouse and the NSTEM project. And the county's going to be looking at $1.2, $1.3 million in annual payments for those bonds. You have an opportunity here, a proposal on the table that could hundreds of thousands of dollars out of the cost of this airport. If you get too cute with this RFP and you wake up with nothing and we run out of time, we're going to be back to the status quo and you would have missed a huge opportunity to cut significant expense, which can go to the funding of those bonds. So I would hope that you work this out, work expediently, and do work with a sense of urgency on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Ron?
One of the things that I think this committee should be looking at is what is the source of revenue in this RFP? It appears to me that the only source of revenue is fuel sales. Everything else is an expense.
No, there's other revenues included. There's tie-down fees and that type of thing. They're all included. I mean,
Okay, the tie-down fees, but...
I don't think they're big, but
I was just saying the big one is fuel.
Yeah, the big one is the fuel.
The rental of the hangars is a private...
not necessarily, not all of them, but...
Well, okay, but I mean, the new ones that we're talking about, the jet hangars. So, I mean, that's where we have to focus, and that just makes the point that some of us are making. You can't cherry pick it. There's only one thing that's going to derive the income, and the rest of it is all, I mean, snow plowing, grass cutting, that's all an expense that somehow has to be covered.
They both weigh on one another.
Frank?
Wouldn't maintenance of aircraft, general aviation or jet, be a thing that could be put up for waste more activity?
Is that something that your group's talking about?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
What is the time frame for, I guess just thinking we're coming into the summer months, I imagine everyone at this table are incredibly busy, as well as, of course, our staff here are. What's the time frame for getting a draft to this group, and how long will they have to be able to take a look at it and we can get formal comment back?
I think our goal is to try to have a draft available in July for this group. I don't know that we can meet that realistically, but that's our goal. And then I would think at least a month, maybe more than a month, for the group to review it, make comments, and get the comments to the group.
And are there any feedback, comments about that timeline? Are you comfortable with that? I mean, this is our opportunity to speak freely, have this discussion, and make sure that these comments get back not only to this group, but to the facilities group.
The point is on timing, sooner the better. I mean, I think everybody can understand that. And if these things don't work out the way that we might hope, in one case, you're left with no other alternative but to say, okay, let's just renew on the old terms, which I don't think anybody wants to see. Whereas if you got to that point where it looks like it's not working and you still had another 6 months or 8 months to go, you could say, let's rethink it. This a la carte thing isn't working out, etc. So sooner the better is what I'm saying, and I think we're past the point of being sooner than better. And if I could just amplify what Ron said again, and what everyone I think is saying, and on the interconnectivity of the different elements. Just think about this for a second. 2 years ago, there were only 3 jets there. I was told a couple months ago that we're up to 5. And then a few weeks ago, I was told that we either have 7 or about to have 7 jets there. Now, these jets, it cost them $1,800 an hour to operate these things, And here's where the money is. Those are the guys that have money in their pockets, okay? But look at, Rich Air has put up these facilities, has brought them in. He's hopefully making some money, off of that. But he's also, I'm sure, looking at, I've increased the gas sales. But is he going to want to increase the gas sales for somebody else that underbid him on, on selling the gas? I think he has to look at the whole thing. And I think as nice as it sounds theoretically on the a la carte thing, it's making it so difficult and so complex that we're much more likely to end up in this situation a few months from now saying, okay, we have nothing. That didn't work. And so our only choice, we have 6 months. The contract says you got to make the choice 6 months before the end of it. And, if Mr. Skimmerhorn isn't willing to renegotiate, say, the fuel flowage thing, which is probably something that we could have gotten from another operator, now we've lost everything. And I don't know why he would be willing to. I mean, if I were in his shoes, I wouldn't, I got you. And why should I go ahead and give away any money? I wouldn't. So we need to do this as quickly as possible so we don't put ourselves in that position. That's all.
And Brian, what I heard you say earlier, it was that there was a discussion about possibly going out and having a consultant. I guess my thought on that is we were kind of hoping that this group would act in terms of a consultant. I understand the concern about wanting to make sure it's fair to everyone, but what I've experienced just with this group of gentlemen here is that they've been able to put aside, we all have, all our political differences, all our feelings on whether or not there should be an extension or no extension. We have had really meaningful discussions, but what I'm particularly impressed with is Tom Clements and Travis Whitehead have had an opportunity to meet off this committee as private citizens and sit down and really start to weigh out options on what's best in both of their opinions and have this great dialogue. And I think together we're stronger. Is there any opportunity, and I have not talked to either one of them about it because I didn't know we were looking at a consultant, but instead of expending another dollar in trying to do that, wouldn't there be a way to ask Travis and Tom if they'd be willing to work with your RFP group and provide some feedback from both sides of the equation, if they'd even be willing, instead of going out and spending more money on a consultant and more time, because we all know that equals time too.
Yeah, I will take that to the chairman, and that decision's above my pay grade, but I'll certainly take that suggestion to the chairman, absolutely.
Well, and is that even something the two of you would be open to doing?
I was hoping today to have a draft RFP, and I gather we don't.
No.
I haven't missed anything. What we were doing in sort of a private working group is we made up a list of other airports in the region, shall I say, that were of similar size, similar makeup, and we split the list up, and we were each going to write 3 or 4 to try to get a copy of their contracts, thinking plagiarism is legal, and we would look at what they had in their contracts. It might give us ideas of things that we should be asking for in our RFP, and it might also give us a knowledge base if we get the contracts that came in response to those RFPs. It might give us sort of a knowledge base to know what is a good deal and what isn't a good deal when the proposals come in. Know if we're getting a fair shake or not. Now again, speaking for myself, I've been busy perfecting appeals and doing a bunch of other things, and my list of 4 airports to call is still there by my phone, and I haven't called yet. And I don't think any of my pilot friends have I haven't seen the results.
Mhm.
So again, we're volunteers, you can't hire volunteers, and we have good intentions, but we haven't yet delivered on giving any sort of a background of RFPs for the county attorney to look at. But again, if you're shooting for July, I guess, it's young. I can go back. Today is young. I can go back today and phone those in and try to get some to look at, and you would almost use them as a checklist, looking through somebody else's RFP to see if we've got it in ours.
I guess one of the concerns I know the chairman mentioned to me yesterday when we were having a brief conversation about this was, concern about, are we bringing an RFP that's in the planning process to a group where people are bidding on it? So what I want to ask before I make the suggestion formal, Tom and Travis, are either one of you planning on bidding on the airport RFP? Is that firm no?
Yes.
Okay. So I think it would be fair to say that both of them, there's not a vested interest in terms of a financial gain to either one of them. In fact, it's costing them money to have their time and expertise here at this table. But I worry when I hear things about going out and getting another consultant, because to me that just means more time, more money. And we've got a group here that have local roots, somewhat to what we just did with the advisory, or with the EMS proposal with the county-wide system. That brings me to my next question, though, Brian. You're on the hot seat, and I apologize, but I actually don't apologize. You're very helpful. Brian, recently we just had a draft RFP that came to attention of our Criminal Justice Committee, and Supervisor Montesi chairs that, and it was for a county-wide EMS RFP. The decision was made in committee that it was I think unexpected, but nonetheless resolution to move forward with an RFP for a countywide system. It was voted on in committee. I think I was the only one that voted no, but it moved on. I thought it would come to a full board for a vote, but I've been corrected and I've been told that it does not go to the full board. As soon as the committee votes on it, it goes out. I'm concerned that what is the process with this draft RFP? Because if all it takes is a vote in committee and the full board doesn't get to vote on it, is there some assurance that this group, that we'll see it, then it will move to facilities? Because once facilities sees it and they vote, we don't have a chance.
Well, in my vast experience of a year and a half, the RFP process does not need committee approval nor board approval. That is a department head function, and if the department head needs to get proposals, they do that. They get the proposals, and then once they get the proposals, it's up to the committee and the board then to approve any contract. So my understanding of the process is that's a function of staff here, is to determine what they need and how to get the proposals in line with the general municipal law and the state finance law. And then if they have proposals, they can then ask the board for authority to enter into a contract. But that can be changed at the whim of the board and the committee, of course.
My
They can
past
say,
experience, though, here is if we want an RFP, it always was vetted via committee. It never was given to a department head to put out an RFP by himself. The committee would always talk about an RFP and then direct the staff to correct one, because you need a little conversation on what you're putting the RFP out about. That's my recollection. I'm going to defer to Frank. You've been here a little bit longer than I have. Is that not the way it always used to go through committee most of the time?
Pretty much.
Yeah. So,
Very often
but I don't. But isn't unless I'm missing something? Isn't the proposal is to get a working document and then present it to the advisory committee for them to go over the working document before it goes out to
Facilities.
yeah.
Okay. So just to reconfirm then, the plan is hopefully they'll take into consideration the generous offer from Travis and Tom that I've forced on the floor to assist with our RFP group in terms of hoping to save some money with a consultant and get some back. Then that draft, with any luck, will be here in July. Before it goes to facilities. And then we'll get the feedback from this group, and that feedback will go to facilities for the committee then to make a decision on the RFP. And then once it goes to committee and committee votes, then it's executed without a full board vote.
Right.
Okay. Supervisor Westcott, I'm sorry, Mr. Westcott.
All right, you tell me whatever you want. I have a suggestion. Great idea, Tom and Travis. I think that's great to track down some contracts. But we have a full-time airport manager who has connections throughout the network of airports. And we have Ross just get on the phone and call his buddies at the other airports and let's get the contracts. Get them in this week, get them in next week.
Don't reinvent the wheel.
Can I ask, Ross, do you have a collection of contracts from other
A
airports?
collection of RFPs that other airports have used to put out for FBO services.
Okay, we won't remake the wheel, we'll find out what you
Yeah, I
have.
have RFPs, I don't have a collection of other contracts, existing contracts for the FBOs, but I have a collection of RFPs, because
But we certainly have all the information on how they're run, which you could disseminate out to these guys.
yeah, and I can certainly get the contracts easy enough, it's not a problem.
Oh, good. So when do you think you'd be able to get that emailed out to this group?
The copies of the RFPs from the other airports?
And then the contracts. So the RFPs you have,
Yeah, I have sample
Okay.
RFPs from
so we can
airports
get
across the country.
that out to this group tomorrow, really, right?
Yeah,
Is that okay?
sure.
And then when could you have a group list, or you said you could get the contracts easy enough? When could you envision getting that out to this group?
It just really depends on how responsive they are to my request, but I can put in the request, you
Okay.
know, today or tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you just be really, persuasive with that and maybe
Sure.
have it in a week?
I'll do my best.
Okay. Kill 'em with charm, Ross.
I'll try.
All right.
All right.
Ron. I'm sorry, Tom.
The question is a little bit of the minutia of putting this contract or the RFP together, but let's assume that the FBO does build the next 3 or 4 hangars and that they all get rented, so now we have more jets there. And let's assume that we need a bigger fuel island. Who pays for that? I mean, because fuel sales are the real source of revenue, so how do you put that into it? That's a county-owned facility right now that we're letting somebody else use. If we need to upgrade that, who pays for that? And, what kind of revenue do you derive from that?
We are actually right now in construction upgrading the fuel farm as we speak. So the old fuel farm had 2 10,000-gallon tanks, one for jet fuel, one for avgas. And they are being upgraded as we speak. We got 2 new tanks, and those tanks have been upgraded to 15,000-gallon tanks. So we have more capacity for each fuel type at the airport as well.
Okay.
All new pump houses. Construction is slated to be completed within 10 days. So we're going to be initiating our testing very soon. Paving happens on Thursday. We're going to have our new fuel farm up and running. Now that fuel farm was funded 90% by the New York State DOT. That was a grant from New York State DOT, not from the FAA, so that was a state grant. And so the county chipped in 10% of the cost, the state chipped in 90%, and the total project cost was about $565,000, I believe, is what the total project cost is. So, and that is a county-owned facility, and the life expectancy on that fuel farm is 30 years. And we did increase our capacity, so we don't anticipate the need to add additional capacity in the foreseeable future.
Thank you.
Okay, there are other, Tom,
I have
I'm
one
so
question.
sorry, yeah.
I'm very sorry to come late to the meeting, but there's one fundamental question I just can't figure out from the context. Are we looking at only one RFP for completely privatizing the entire airport, or is there also a status quo option where county forces would continue to maintain the airport and, some FBO, perhaps Rich Air, would be the FBO? Is the status quo still on the table going forward?
I'll let Brian give you the recap of that.
I think the goal is to have as many different kinds of proposals as possible and be able to choose from among more than one conceptually. So if the only proposal we get is to take everything over, we would have to pick and choose and negotiate with the responder. If we get more than one proposal that we could pick and choose among, that would be the ideal situation. I guess that's the hit a home run or strike out option, right? I mean,
Okay. we're not committed to privatizing the airport at this point. The thinking of this group is not committed to that. We're looking at it, but we're not committed.
When you say privatize, the direction I got from the chairman was...
Privatize the maintenance of the airport.
What the chairman told me is privatize those things that it will be profitable for the county to privatize, as much as is a good situation for the county. So, those are my marching orders.
Thank you.
And, to that point, Rich Air has put a lot of money into this airport, as has the county, but I think we can all agree, given his investments, we've seen a lot of growth. Travis just pointed out that just the growth in the jet alone. What is happening to the proposal from 5 months ago from Rich Air? Have we responded to that?
Well, it's informing our process with the RFP. Okay, but there's also no formal request for proposal out there. It's a proposal, it's an idea, and if the board says do it, impose it, then we would do what we could to do it, impose it. But there's a contract right now. If Rich Air wants to change their FBO contract, if the board says to Ross and my office, do that, and negotiate a change in the contract with an extension, we would do that. But apart from that, we can't evaluate it, I don't think, as a proposal without that kind of direction. There is an FBO contract out there. I think there are some things in that proposal that open up a lot of questions. It said we'll take over everything, but there were half a dozen things the county would still have to do. So, we are using what was in that proposal to inform the RFP process going forward, but we also can't let a prospective proposer write the RFP.
Right. Well, I just want to make sure that we have responded in some way to Rich Air's proposal, and I guess if we haven't formally, you could certainly, Steve, convey, this information today, and that in one way or the other, we are utilizing that proposal. But so it sounds like there's two options. We're continue with the RFP process unless at such time the board decides they want to stop that process, ask for an amendment in the contract, and work through the proposal that was on the floor by Rich several months ago. Is that correct, Brian?
Yeah.
So it's either the will of the board or follow through with the RFP process. And right now we're moving the RFP process unless something else happens and there's a vote that takes place and that occurs. Okay. I want to make sure we hit on everybody's concerns. Are there any other questions or concerns regarding the RFP that should be discussed here today? Mark?
I just have a final comment. I somewhat take issue with the fairness thing. I mean, any FBO out there, any company out there can come proactively to this committee, to this board, and make a presentation and say, I want to take over these operations. So that's what Rich Skimmelhorn has done, and that's it. Now, if there are things within his proposal that can't be done for federal grant reasons or whatever reasons, we should give him that feedback. Well, my feeling is a bird in the hand is better than two in the bush. You go carve this thing up in the hope that you're going to eke out a little bit better of a proposal. You risk basically ending up with nothing more than status quo. And nobody, I think, in this room wants that. That's going to be my last comment to that. So.
I want to respectfully disagree with Mr. Westcott. The status quo is really not bad out there. We have very good county maintenance of the airport. We have a very good FBO. And I do take exception to Mark's advertisement that the privatizing of the airport maintenance is a no-brainer. The last time I heard the word no-brainer used, it was in relation to a trash plant that we owned in Hudson Falls for a while, and then a railroad we bought. Okay, there are no-brainers, Mr. Westcott, in county government. We can make mistakes all the time. So I would tend to, my work on this advisory committee, I would want to keep the status quo option open until we've had much more time to study privatizing, and I'm worried that we're rushing into privatizing it, and whereas we may do it with the thought that we're saving $500,000, it may end up costing us an extra $500,000 if we don't do it carefully. So I just want to put that out there, that I think status quo is an option that we should consider, and we should proceed very cautiously as a county. Thank you.
Brian?
I want to respond to Mr. Westcott. I want to make sure you understand what I'm saying. We have a current contract, and out of respect for the current contractor, even though he's made that proposal, I wouldn't mess around in the context of that current contract. That's where I was going with that. If it were a different proposer or the same proposer, there's a sanctity to the contract that we have. That's all I mean.
Thank you for clarifying. Yeah, Tom, I'm sure you enjoy the airport out there, but as a taxpayer without an airplane, I really take issue with spending $650,000 a year out there. That's why I said it's a no-brainer, and it has nothing to do with the trash plan, which I have written about, and also...
And I think that
far from a no-brainer.
this is a great venue to have these discussions and to speak with each other and talk about the pros and cons of it. I just want to focus back for one moment. Ross, earlier we talked about what the county can't privatize, and the direction, of course, we've heard from Brian, from our chairman, is to look at those things that we can privatize to profit for county. When do you think you'll have that list of what, I mean, that I think is
Well, I
really...
can provide the grant assurances. I'm sure many of you have already read them, but I mean, the one that is of biggest concern is granting of an exclusive right. When you enter into a contract with one entity to control the entire airport, you've entered into a contract for an exclusive right to the airport, and that's a violation of the FAA grant assurances. So you want to be careful in how you construct that. That's all.
So
Yeah,
you,
but can't you, you must know what is county-owned and county must maintain irregardless. If you privatize certain aspects of it, you ought to be able to give us that in a short order, right? I mean,
I can do that.
sure. Then I'll be able to get that information out to everybody on the committee so they don't waste time focusing on something that you can't put on the RFP anyways.
right. So do you think maybe within that same week time frame, Ross, we could get that email out to the advisory group and perhaps also to the RFP group? I think that would be very helpful. And I agree with Chairman Garrity. We don't want anybody spending a lot of time on...
Chairman.
I would like to, reach out to
All the
the
time.
New York Airport's district office and consult with them before I give you any final answers. Just make sure I don't
Okay.
say anything that's not factual.
Yeah, but I mean, you
Yeah, I can get that. I'll get that to you as quickly as possible.
that one meeting I attended, you know what buildings belong to
Oh,
Warren County and
certainly.
stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So you ought to be able to give
Yeah.
this committee and the RFP committee somewhat of an idea of what you're talking about as far as county-owned facilities that you can't give over to anybody irregardless. And I don't know if you can,
I think I
if we can
understand.
suffocate the
Yeah.
maintenance on those buildings to somebody in the RFP. Maybe you can. I don't know.
And if you need help with clarification on that, just reach out to Kevin before that week timeline so that we can stay. I think at this point we need to be really clear with our timelines because, as Travis said, I think we've probably passed the sooner mark. So let's stick to those timelines and give everybody enough of an opportunity to take a look at them. So just to recap then, Ross, you're going to send out today or tomorrow the RFPs that you have collected already. Save Tom a little bit of work there, right, Tom?
Right.
And then the collection of the contracts, you're going to reach out, get those. Hopefully within a week we'll have some examples of contracts other counties have. And you'll also put together a list of what can and cannot be privatized. And any clarification you need with that, I'm sure Kevin or Brian can help. So we'll look forward to those things. We know our timeline. Hopefully Brian's going back. He's going to provide an overview of this meeting to the group, and also, the suggestion of Tom and Travis, as well as the timeline of wanting a draft RFP in July, and ideally at least a month to this group, if not more, to be able to work on some feedback. Kevin had the suggestion of going to this group and getting some feedback in terms of the direction, right, that you...
Well, yeah, it's either, they may be able, Travis and Tom may be able to zero in on either general aviation or more towards the jets, or you combine both of them.
Okay.
Because there's needs for general aviation, there's needs for jets, correct?
And there really shouldn't be much conflict.
There isn't much conflict.
We use the same facilities, other than we don't use the same fuel, but there really, I don't see any inherent conflict between serving both populations.
Okay, good.
And now that we have a standing report on the Facilities Committee, what I'd like to know at this point, unless there's further discussions about the RFP, is there anything else from anyone? No. is, facilities committee will meet. Is there anything at this point that you would like, other than the discussion about the RFP, given back to facilities to take a look at from this group? I know there's been some topics in the past. Our hope is that facilities will refer things to us. They have in the past. We've had a couple discussions, and that we can also refer items over to facilities for consideration. So at this point, I'm wondering, is there anything that's outstanding or pending that you think as a group should be brought to the facilities committee? I'm going to ask this question every single meeting because I think it's really important that we recognize that we have an opportunity to ask the facilities committee to consider the will of this group.
I just have, what about the long-term, short-term parking out there? I noticed none of those ever got put up. What's going on with the parking stuff?
All right, so while we put the signs on hold until we made a decision on the proposal for the parking modifications from Rich Air, Steve and I finally got together yesterday with Jeff, and we talked about the parking lot and the design and some of the recommended changes to their proposal, and we also discussed maybe modifying it, offered some input on possible other layouts for them to consider, and Steve is going to
What's the
take that
time
into
frame for
consideration.
getting up signs? I mean, don't be like the state of New York. It take from 2015 to put up 2-hour parking signs in my town until this summer. I mean, how long is it going to take before you guys can come to a working agreement on these parking signs?
Well, I don't think it'll take too long for us to come to an agreement.
Before the next meeting of this group? You'll have them up?
It's in Steve's court right now, so we'll...
Are we talking about two different things,
I was
though?
going to say, they're kind of separate, aren't they? The parking plan is separate from the signage.
The parking plans, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the long-term, short-term parking signs we're
restaurant
going to put up to try to direct people.
My concern is that we're in the busy season, right? We've got lots of planes, lots of people at the restaurant, but back in December, into January and February, we had this discussion about the parking signs. So I don't know how it got put on hold because I haven't heard from the committee that they put it on hold. Facilities moved forward with it and said that that was okay. So did something happen from facilities to now that they didn't get up?
The proposal to modify the parking lot, the construction and redesign of the parking lot, it didn't make sense to spend money making signs if they weren't going to be applicable to the new layout.
Well, I thought we already identified the areas temporarily that we're going to put them up. I mean,
If that's your wish, I can get those signs ordered
well,
right
I mean,
away.
it says short-term
But I
parking
didn't-
or long-term parking. Regardless of where the parking plan comes out, you can still reuse the signs, right? Yes, no?
I think some of them likely.
Well, I thought the feedback from this committee and from facilities was we needed the restaurant, the short-term, the long-term. We spent a great deal of time talking about where they need to go and what they need to say and how they were going to get made, and we left thinking they were going up. So I think we're talking about two separate issues, and I just was confused because I know I spoke with our county attorney and our county administrator when I heard that they were put on hold, and I guess my question is, who put them on hold?
I decided not to move forward with making the signs because we had a proposal on the table from Rich Air to modify the parking lot with major construction and redesign. So until we knew whether or not we were going to move forward with that layout, I didn't think it was prudent to spend money and resources in building signs that may go to waste. That's all it was. It was my decision.
I think what we're hearing here today is from our county administrator who wants the signs up, that the committee made that decision and they need to go up.
It's a couple signs, and you can reuse them.
That's fine.
We make them.
I can move forward with that.
Okay, so when can we get an update on that? Can they get up this week, Ross?
I can give you an update at Facilities Committee.
No, can the signs get up this week?
I have to check with the sign shop. I know they're busy this time of year, but I will put it in the request.
Okay, can you copy us on the request, please?
Absolutely.
Travis?
So one of the concerns when this first came up, Mr. Skimmerhorn said there might be a person that's out of town for 3 or 4 days and he's parking right in front of the restaurant. So if you put a sign up there, that's one thing, but what about enforcement? No sense of putting up a fine sign unless we have enforcement. Is that taken care of, enforcement?
Well, I think informally, a good suggestion to that might be if that car is seen there, certainly Rich Air can notify Ross and immediately we can look into whose car that is and have that enforcement aspect of it, for them to be
Boot on
notified.
it? Are you going to tow it? I mean, you know.
Well, you can try to at least track down and see if it's somebody on a trip or not on a trip. You would hope that
Yeah.
they can read a sign and follow it. That's
Well, no, I was
You'd
going to say, if
hope.
the sign's there, it would alleviate that problem immediately, you know,
Yeah,
and
try
if
to
for some
avoid-
reason they happen to miss it, we're all human, usually we can track the person down and let them know. But with the sign, it does help facilitate that.
I think that was the reason why, and if, I know it seems like, you know, we got a candy jar over at Rich Air, which we're very grateful for the vending options, but I think it is frustrating for all of us because we kind of feel like, is that the only accomplishment we've had since November? I tend to say, no, we have a great mission statement, we're coming together, we're having great dialogue, we're giving referrals, we're receiving referrals. I'm kind of a glass half full kind of girl, but I have to admit this parking issue was discussed and we wanted the signs up. We followed the proper channels. They went to facilities. Facilities agreed to it. It's a separate issue from the parking plan. The parking plan will take quite some time, I'm sure. And this was really an easy fix to those long-term issues of a car being in a parking lot or someone not knowing where to park. And it's just good stories, being good partners. So we'll look forward to those signs going up this week. I am sure our county administrator can make a call to the sign shop and get that expedited.
You don't need to. You can just request it. I mean, it's two
Okay.
blanks. Say short-term parking, long-term parking, a couple poles.
And I think we had restaurant parking in there too, right?
There was discussion on it.
Yeah.
but-
Okay.
So, okay.
Whatever.
So Kevin and Russ are really looking forward to working together on that. Moving on to the next topic, which was the parking plan itself. Can we get an update on where that is, and do you need anything to go back to facilities for that? Because I know Brian was working on that, and our engineers reviewed it, and now you guys have had a discussion, and where are we?
Well, Ross, and as Ross had mentioned, we get a chance to finally discuss it, you know, after we submitted it back in March and then again in May with the updated portion of it. It's really a growing process in the fact that it is going to take some time to make sure we have the layout correct. And we discussed some options yesterday that are not part of that plan that was the latest submitted to the committee. So we want to entertain those options. I know Ross is going to look at an option for, you know, different arrangements with the circle, and, you know, if there's more of a partnership where the county can help out and be hands on this versus it all being one entity being the county or one entity being Rich Air and stuff like that, which I think is great. You know, we definitely do need a new solution to help not only alleviate the parking with the restaurant, but also as the airport grows. That's also a major concern that we're trying to consider at this time. So we want to take some more time, evaluate it, get some more options on the table. This was just a starting point to see where we can go from there.
Do you need this on the agenda at facilities, or are you feeling like you need an additional month?
We probably need an additional month. Right now, we've got other projects that are our prime focus at the moment, as well as coming into our peak season. So I think another month would be more adequate and more appropriate to discuss those options.
Would you like me to leave this on a pending item for this committee for the July meeting, to keep it on target and have a report on where you're at with it at that point?
Sure, we can do that.
Okay, Ross, are you comfortable with that?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
The county engineering department look at it, Ross?
They did, yep.
Okay, so they've...
Yeah, they looked at the proposal that they had submitted and offered suggestions and signage, traffic flow, that type of thing, without making changes so much to the layout, but functional.
And how is the honor box going?
Well, it's great that we have food there now. We've sold about 55 items, which is great, so people are using it, pilots and passengers alike. We've only unfortunately received about half the revenue we should have been receiving, so somebody's dipping in when they shouldn't be. But, you know, it is a work in progress. You know, we're willing to give it, you know, some more time. Hopefully that will subside and level out, but unfortunately right now we're at a loss of about $52 and change. So, but people are using it, so that is a good thing. You know, and I don't know if it needs to be a different procedure, but it is visible. You know, if we need to put it in another area where it's more visible to have more accountability, we might look in that too. But people are using it, and that's a good thing, so.
There was a suggestion made by Supervisor Sokol last month. I don't know if you just want to revisit that again and maybe see if that's something maybe the county and Rich Air could partner with together. But, you know, we've had lots of discussions about the diner and breakfast and changing over amended contracts and all those things. But Matt, you had a really good suggestion. Do you remember your suggestion?
I do, Madam Chair. You know, it's funny because I just went this last weekend with my son to Onondaga County. We went out to Syracuse. He had a lacrosse showcase, so we stayed at a Holiday Inn Express, and I actually paid particular attention to the whole process and what they had to offer. Some of the things were like eggs and sausage, but you can almost get that stuff microwave nowadays, you know. But they had one attendant there who was filling milk, cereal. There was that, they have a pancake. It used to be a waffle maker, but now they have like a pancake maker there. And it's all just pouring a batter in there, and it spits it out, and you're all done. But there was just one person there who was refilling. You take care of your own table, you clean up, maybe they go around with a rag and wipe it. That's built into the cost of, so you get breakfast for free. However, I don't know how Rich Air would do it, where they would charge a nominal fee for that section, but it can be done very easily. They got to brew coffee, they got to pour juice. One person can easily take care of something. Like that kind of breakfast flair. But, and for minimal cost of equipment too, I don't think it takes too much to purchase a microwave and product.
So just some food for thought. You know, I don't know if that's something we can look at as a county private relationship, but...
No pun intended, right?
Oh yeah, no pun intended. That was funny. But maybe, Brian, as this RFP process is also growing, I mean, that could be a suggestion in terms of addressing that need.
Yep.
Without overthinking or getting into the details and micromanaging something, but
That was one of the elements of the of one of the a la carte items in our prior meetings was a food service, you know, some arrangement for a food service. So, you know, it may very well be that nobody decides that they can make money doing that, but that should be some private venture's decision, not the county's.
So just wanted to make sure we brought that up and put that on the record too of that suggestion. Is there anything else that anyone would like to see referred back to facilities in June? Right now it doesn't look like we have anything to refer over to them. Any ideas? Nothing? We're good? Everything else is wonderful at the airport. Things are great and we have no problem?
Business is picking up. It's getting busy. Summer season's here.
Good.
Construction projects are moving along nicely. No issues.
No, the only thing I was going to add was just, you know, make sure we make a note to keep the hangar proposals on track.
Okay.
With that information there. We're looking at getting our engineering plans together by Thursday of this week, so we should have those together for the new proposed, already approved hangars 5 and 6, and then the additional 7 and 8.
Is that something we'll talk about at facilities, or that's already moving forward and we're good?
Well, 5 and 6 should already be moving forward. It should be a rolling pending item.
Okay.
But 7 and 8 should also be on the table for another upcoming meeting as well.
Yeah.
Yep, 5 and 6 are been approved by the committee to move forward in advance. And there's a resolution authorizing that. And then I believe what we just need to do is finalize the layout and for the Schedule A, what will go into the lease document for those 5 and 6.
Okay.
And then 7 and 8, we're still waiting for the site plans. We'll get those site plans. We'll take a look at that functionality-wise, airspace case, all that FAA stuff, environmental stuff. Take a look at those two hangars. They'll need additional environmental review because they weren't reviewed as part of the first two, so they'll unfortunately need to do that process over again. That'll be a short environmental assessment for the FAA as well. So we'll have to do that same reimbursement process. The county will contract out for those services, and then Rich Air can reimburse the county for the environmental assessment work, the airspace case.
Okay. So you guys are on the same page with
Yes,
this?
ma'am.
Yep. Excellent. Supervisor Sokol,
Yes,
did you have a question?
Sure. Just one other thing, probably shame on me for not knowing this, but Memorial Day weekend, did you guys start opening for lunch?
Yes.
It is open.
Yep, we're open for lunch as of right now. Still the same days, Tuesday through Saturday. And so, and noon time till, I think 3:30, and then they break briefly till 4 o'clock.
Does that
Go to dinner
through
service.
Labor Day?
Columbus Day is my understanding.
Oh, good. Great. Okay, well, if there's no further business and nothing else we want to bring to the committee, I guess what we'll do at this point is adjourn our meeting. We will have the minutes sent out. Can you make sure the minutes get sent out? Okay, thank you. With the link to the YouTube, we'll convey all that information to the RFP group. We'll hear back from Brian on how those suggestions are taken, and we'll report this information as well as the Facilities Committee on what we accomplished here today. But I again want to thank all of you for volunteering your time and being here and not giving up, because I think this is going to work out very well.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
Do I need a motion? I don't really need a motion to adjourn. No, we're adjourned.
Ross,